Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, so today we'll be speaking from Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 9, text 47. So, Hey Agna Kaila Yadi Caitanya Malakara Parama Ananda Paila Vriksha Parivara Hey Agna Kaila Yadi Caitanya Malakara Parama Ananda Paila Vriksha Parivara This Agna, order, Kaila, gave, Yadi, when, Caitanya, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Malakara, as a gardener, Parama, the greatest, Ananda, pleasure, Paila, got, Vriksha, of the tree, Parivara, descendants. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The descendants of the tree, the devotees of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, were very glad to receive this order directly from the Lord. Repeat after me. The descendants of the tree, the devotees of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, were very glad to receive this order directly from the Lord. And the purport: it is the desire of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu that the benevolent activities of the Sankirtan movement, which was inaugurated 500 years ago in Navadvip, be spread all over the world for the benefit of all human beings. Unfortunately, there are so many so-called followers of Caitanya Mahaprabhu who are satisfied simply to construct a temple, make a show of the deities, collect some funds, and utilize them for eating and sleeping. There is no question of their preaching the cult of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world. But even though they are unable to do so, if anyone else does it, they become envious. This is the condition of the modern followers of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. The age of Kali is so strong that it affects even the so-called followers of Lord Caitanya. At least the followers of Lord Caitanya Prabhu must come out of India to preach his cult all over the world, for this is the mission of Lord Caitanya. The followers of Lord Caitanya must execute his will with heart and soul, being more tolerant than the trees and humbler than the straw in the street. Okay. So, the descendants of the tree, the devotees of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, were very glad to receive this order directly from the Lord. Does anyone remember what the order was that Lord Caitanya gave? Distribute the fruits of the desire tree. So, Sankirtan, Harinam Sankirtan, basically, distribute the holy name, distribute Krishna consciousness all over the world. So that's the order back a few texts. Text 36, that's the order that Lord Caitanya gave to all the descendants of this tree of devotional service, which is the chapter that we're looking at the moment, chapter 9. It's called the Tree of Devotional Service. And then following on from there, chapters 10 and 11 and 12 as well, it's also describing this tree. So the tree, it's a figurative tree, and it's kind of the same, as like a family tree or a tree of the ancestors that we sometimes do. We want to see who our ancestors are, so this is seeing who our spiritual ancestors are. And we can see that through Srila Prabhupada, through the development of ISKCON, we today are connected to Lord Chaitanya, which is incredible. And there is a lineage which goes back, and that's the disciplic succession. That's the family, the spiritual family of devotees, of Vaishnavas. So it's pretty remarkable, actually, that we have this description. And so this same message, this same order that Lord Chaitanya is giving the descendants, is giving us as the descendants of this desire tree, is all through the Vedic literature. We hear, Harinam Sankirtan. It's the ultimate order that all spiritual masters in this lineage give to their disciples, and it's the ultimate spiritual duty that we have as aspiring devotees. That's the duty that we have to our spiritual master, is to distribute Krishna consciousness as much as we can. And Lord Chaitanya didn't discriminate. He didn't say, okay, this person is qualified to receive Krishna consciousness and this one's a little bit too fallen. In the prayer that we just sung, it says, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most munificent, the most magnanimous. He doesn't choose who's going to receive this, the fruits of Krishna consciousness. He gives it out completely freely, and that's his mercy. And we're very fortunate to have been given those fruits. So the same order is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 22, Text 35. And Krishna says, "It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words." So this welfare activities, maybe it comes to mind, we're thinking philanthropic work, open charities, hospitals, schools, and they're all good, but if we want the ultimate welfare activities, which is the most auspicious, the most beneficial to all living entities, not even just humans, all living entities, then that greatest welfare work that we can do is follow Lord Chaitanya's order, which is to distribute Krishna consciousness. Because the effects will just be completely transcendental and eternal. They're not temporary. It's not just helping this body. It's helping us. It's helping our soul, which is eternal. So when we read this order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the descendants of the desire tree, instead of just seeing it in an abstract way, we can actually take that order as an order to each and every one of us personally. So ultimately, because Srila Prabhupada has connected us to Lord Chaitanya through ISKCON, these purports are so relevant and practical for us. ISKCON is explained, Srila Prabhupada explains ISKCON as one of the branches in this desire tree. So we've got the roots, which are the 9 sannyasis. It explains in all these chapters who each of the different parts of the tree are. Lord Chaitanya is the trunk. Lord Chaitanya is also the tree and the bestower of the fruits and the grower of the fruits. Lord Chaitanya is all of the tree, basically, but he's also explained as being the trunk. And then there's Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda, who are like the biggest branches of the tree. And then coming off from them, there's a bunch of other little branches and little twigs and little leaves. So I guess we're kind of little leaves on the tree. And so Lord Chaitanya's mercy is emanating throughout the entire tree, and his order is emanating throughout the entire tree, all the way to us. So it actually makes it quite simple if we think about what Krishna consciousness is. And it's simply that, following Lord Chaitanya's order. a lot of us, we might want to receive some special order from our personal spiritual master, some order that's only for us, and like that. But if we really think about it, our spiritual masters are accepting the orders from their spiritual masters, and all the acharyas are saying exactly the same thing. It's very simple. We have to distribute Krishna consciousness somehow or other. That has to be our mood, and that has to be our intention behind our service and our actions. And it says here that the devotees were glad, or in the text it's ananda, so bliss. They're feeling bliss by receiving the order of Lord Chaitanya, and I think we all can feel that as well when we're on Harinam, or when we're distributing Krishna conscious literature in Guru Puja. We're chanting and we feel that bliss. So we can really relate to that feeling of accepting the order of the spiritual master and working to execute it. There's a bliss that comes from that, and that bliss is us tasting the fruits of the desire tree, the fruits being the holy name and Krishna consciousness, devotional service. So preaching is what gives us life, it gives us taste, and sometimes if we don't preach, we start to feel a little bit kind of, uninspired. But then as soon as we share a pastime of Krishna, or we share the Maha Mantra, we do kirtan, we get that life back. And that's the analogy of the ripened fruit of the desire tree, which we can taste by distributing Krishna consciousness. And the more we share it, the more we can relish. So it's not like if we give it away, we can't enjoy it for ourselves. We need to keep it all, covet it like that. But in the previous texts, Lord Chaitanya is saying, there's too many fruits. I can't distribute it all myself, guys. You have to help me. And so it's not like there's a limit to the amount of fruits that are coming from Lord Chaitanya's tree, because he's watering it constantly with his will. And so more and more fruits and flowers are growing, and that's more and more service for us to distribute. So, Lord Chaitanya is the gardener, he's the tree itself, and he's also the bestower and enjoyer of its fruits. But he asks us for help to distribute these fruits, and therefore through his mercy, he's engaging us in service, eternal service. So unlike, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, the conclusion is that we must surrender to Krishna, and then he can guide us, he can help us. But Lord Chaitanya's mood is quite different. So he doesn't require that surrender. He actually doesn't require anything from us, which is quite incredible if you think about it. He's just giving it out. And the method is he's flooding the world with Krishna consciousness. He's flooding our heart with Krishna consciousness. And then Jayapataka Swami explained it as if, all plants need water, but then you need to stop watering it for a little while so it can dry up, and then the seed will germinate and grow. But if you just keep watering the plant, and you don't let it dry up, it'll start to rot. So in that way, Lord Chaitanya is just watering the seeds of, the material desires in our heart, that contamination in our heart. He just keeps watering it until they rot and they just can't grow anymore. So I thought that was a really great example. And so I was in 2017 or 16, I think it was, I went to Radhadesh for the Vyasa Puja of Kadamba Swami, and I hadn't read Caitanya Caritamrita yet, but on the wall was this huge tree with all these different names on it, and I didn't know what it was. And then, but it was really incredible decoration. And so Maharaj said in class, he said, he loves all the decorations that his disciples do for him, for the Vyasa Puja, but he'd also love it if the decorations were meaningful and had some philosophical kind of shastric basis. So his disciples that year decided to recreate the whole Lord Chaitanya tree with all the names and all the parts, and it's online actually, it's on his blog if anyone's interested, but I thought that visual example was really helpful. And this image of the tree, this analogy of the tree in describing devotees is also, in the Vaishnava pranams that we do every morning, Vanchakalpatarubhya, means, devotees are wish-fulfilling desire trees. So they're full of compassion for the fallen souls. So this compassion is what we really need to try to develop. We can sort of understand the order and try to execute it, but without developing compassion and humility and tolerance, which is what's mentioned, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport. We need to preach with humility and tolerance. Then that's how it's going to be the most effective. And Srila Prabhupada was the best example of someone who had all of those qualities, the most compassionate. We hear how his disciples were asking him, Srila Prabhupada, why do you get sick? We heard pure devotees shouldn't get sick because sickness is karma, and pure devotees don't get karma. And he said that his sin is that he's accepted too many disciples, but he will keep doing it. He'll keep accepting disciples just to help. That's out of his compassion, But it's not recommended to accept too many disciples. But because he's so merciful and so compassionate, he did. And then another example was, I think it was mentioned in class a few weeks ago, how one Brahmana was very concerned that Srila Prabhupada was, there was murtis and devotees were worshipping the murti of Srila Prabhupada in the temple while he was still alive, because it said if you do that, then the spiritual master will take the sin of the disciples. And but he said, he didn't. He said that's just what that's what I'm going to do. And similarly, I just read something recently about Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He too accepted. He wrote a prayer saying, "Please let me take on all the suffering of my disciples so that they can be free to practice Krishna consciousness with ease." And then within a short amount of time, he got sick. He got terminally ill himself. So anyway, these are just examples of the qualities that devotees develop in distributing Krishna consciousness, the selflessness that they develop. And so in the Chaitanya Mangala, there's a famous verse which says, "Taking the sharp sword of Nama Sankirtan, I will root out and destroy the demoniac mentality in the hearts of all the conditioned souls. And if some sinful people escape and giving up Dharma go off to far away countries, my Senapati Bhakta will go there." So Lord Chaitanya is predicting that Srila Prabhupada will come and take this Krishna consciousness to us, to the Western countries. So a Senapati Bhakta, that's what we call Srila Prabhupada. It's actually a military term, so it's like the commander. And so in that same way of describing Srila Prabhupada's service, there's a very nice class by Jayapataka Swami on this verse, which I listened to. And he explains how Srila Prabhupada, as the military commander, made a beachhead. So I didn't know what a beachhead was, but it means when an army first arrives at a beach or at the shore, they get there and then they can gradually move in on the territory of the what do you call it? Of the opposition, yes. So Srila Prabhupada created that for us. He went to the West and established, an embassy or an oasis where his disciples could then preach and share Krishna consciousness further. And so he said half the work is done and the other half is remaining. But this war, we're talking military analogy. This war, it's not necessarily against people or land. It's not like that. The war is actually against Maya, the demoniac mentality in people, the sinful mentality. So it's the illusion which is covering the people's intelligence and spiritual vision. So sometimes it's explained, Maya being our shadow. So if we're looking at the sun, if we're looking at Krishna, then we don't see behind us, we don't see Maya. But as soon as we turn away from Krishna, then she's right there. She's right there behind us. So this is what the war is that Srila Prabhupada was talking about, the war against Maya. And so in the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks quite sort of strongly about the intention of the followers of Lord Chaitanya. So, for example, he says, unfortunately, there are many so-called followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who are satisfied simply to construct a temple, make a show of deities, collect some funds, and utilize them for eating and sleeping. There's no question of their preaching the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world, but even though they are unable to do so, if anyone else does it, they become envious. So it reminds me a bit what they say in Australia. They say the tall poppy syndrome. So if someone's succeeding and someone's doing something that you're not capable of doing, you kind of resent them for it and get envious and you want to pull them down. And Srila Prabhupada, in a lot of the purports in Caitanya Caritamrita, he does mention that it was a little bit difficult for him with his god brothers, and sometimes kind of saying, you went to the West and you did this, and just not fully supporting him. But Srila Prabhupada and his spiritual master and the acharyas in our line, they just had such broad vision. They weren't concerned with who was going to be the next acharya, which is what a lot of conflict was happening after Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left. Even though he said to develop a GBC and develop a committee between the disciples, they, in some cases, instead they sort of were squabbling over who was going to be the next acharya and who was going to take certain facilities and things like that. But Srila Prabhupada's vision was so great. You know, he was simply executing the order of his spiritual master and Lord Chaitanya, which was, you know, he's going to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. And even there's an account of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who's Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. He was going on a walk with his disciples, and all of a sudden he just looked up at the moon and he said, there's materialistic living entities there, we need to preach Krishna consciousness to them. And Srila Prabhupada too, you know, in the West, he didn't discriminate against who he was giving Krishna consciousness to. I mean, the first disciples, the first followers were more or less hippies, and you know, but through giving the mercy, then they became purified, and then they were able to focus and fix their mind on serving Srila Prabhupada, and just did such amazing things. So Srila Prabhupada had this humility, which he also describes in the purport. He explains the followers of Lord Chaitanya must execute his will with heart and soul, being more tolerant than a tree and humbler than a straw in the street. So humility, Radhanath Swami explains humility as being freedom from the anxiety of having the satisfaction of being honored by others. So it's actually, humility equals freedom. You know, you're not worried anymore, you're not concerned about your image and your what people are thinking. And so, whereas pride is the opposite, it makes us crave honor, and so it binds us, it imprisons us. And then with tolerance, tolerance empowers us to not let irritating circumstances steal our peace of mind. And so Srila Prabhupada again just dealt with so many irritating circumstances and really difficult circumstances, you know, things being stolen from him. In New York he was all by himself, and just when we read about his time before he really met, you know, before the movement really took off, it just seems like one obstacle after the other. But because he's a pure devotee, he has humility and tolerance, he just persevered. And he said one's greatness has to be estimated by the ability to tolerate provoking situations. So yeah, he's really an example of someone who's made the order of Lord Chaitanya and his spiritual master his heart and soul. And yeah, so that's what we can learn from him. I think I'll stop there. If there's anything anyone would like to add.
I have a question. So, Lord Chaitanya's instructions were to preach to everyone, and that's like a big part of fulfilling his wishes. So how in this difficult time of lockdown and everything, what's the best way as a community and individuals can we continue that instruction?
Well, I think we need to be creative, because sharing Krishna consciousness is transcendental. It doesn't rely necessarily on the traditional methods of Sankirtan. You know, that it's not that there's just Harinam in the street and going out with your books in the street and talking to people. That's sort of how it has happened, I guess. But there are so many devotees who are doing more distribution of Krishna consciousness during lockdown than ever. Vaisheshika Prabhu's one, and they're doing online preaching. I mean, most people are more online than offline anyway, so it's like, yeah, just finding ways to share Krishna consciousness online is a big preaching tool at the moment. But then also, well, I think, you know, we have a community, there's so many of us here now, and we can encourage and inspire each other. We still have Krishna Village, there's still volunteers here. There's always someone that we can talk to Krishna about. And it doesn't have to be huge. I mean, we see what Prabhupada did, but it's not that, you know, we all have to imitate that and think that we can be as powerful as Prabhupada. We just do our little bit every day. I guess it's developing that internal mood of distributing, you know, following that order. Not expecting huge results, but just giving our best, like that. That's what I would say. Vasu?
If I can... If I can just add to that, I was just reflecting upon Lord Chaitanya, and when he was preaching, there would be the rainy season, and the rainy season, all the roads would be washed out, nobody could go anywhere. So all the sages, all the parties that were preaching, they would all stay indoors for 4 months every year and do self-reflection. So in one sense also some difficulties that we have with restrictions, and that they're sort of tantamount to that. It's a type of self-reflection also. I mean, preaching is there, but then when the whole thing lifts and it goes away, then we're more ready to just burst out and, you know, become more breathing.
Yeah, nice point. Prabhu?
Well, our passion, you could say, is developing this community.
Yeah.
And making it as welcoming and ideal as possible.
Yeah.
As Srila Prabhupada said, that people would flock to our farms in the future, when the world becomes very difficult. So we should not think we've got nothing to do. There's so much to do, so that the world can come.
Yeah.
There's a lot for us to learn, a lot to expand on, and it's such a fantastic field for preaching. So we should be meditating on all the time, thinking how we can improve it, how we can attract people more to come in when things do open up. If we let things deteriorate, and we're not ready to receive people, that will be to our detriment. So there's so much to do, so much for self-development, as well as developing the community, making it the ideal location where people can come and really appreciate Krishna consciousness. We do see that as it is now, people come here and they really appreciate the community for what it stands for. I get inspired to see how everyone works so nicely together here. We're put up with each other. Sometimes we become familiar with one another and that edge wears off. But we need to appreciate everybody's contribution. And it takes a lot of effort to keep one of these communities going. There's so many thousands of man-hours a week goes into keeping such a thing going. Taking care of the devis, etc., etc. So there's so much for us to do. It may not feel like direct preaching sometimes, but we should not forget that long-term goal. It's a very important preaching.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for your class, Suvarna. It was very, very touching and really, really helpful. I just wanted to add on to what has been said, thank you for that we can't minimize the impact of our preaching, what our preaching has on people, particularly in the village who haven't been in contact with Krishna consciousness. I get to talk to a lot of volunteers who have had even a brief moment with a devotee, and it changes their life and it really impacts them, and it's really something that's very simple, and it doesn't have to be a huge preaching effort. It can be just a simple conversation, showing them something in the temple or having a conversation about prashadam. It's really something that feels so simple for us is really impactful for them. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Like everyone of us follow the process and we think like we're following sincerely. So how to know that like we are becoming sincere follower, not so-called followers?
How do we know if we're sincere and not so-called follower of Lord Chaitanya? It seems like very sincere followers of Lord Chaitanya think that they're so-called followers. So I don't think there's ever going to be a point where we know, okay, now, yes, I'm very sincere.
What sign we can see in our life?
What signs in our life? Well, I don't know. I'm sure others can answer it better than I can, but I think when we know that we've done the best we can in our service, there is some mercy that we feel, that we can taste Lord Chaitanya's mercy and Krishna's mercy. I don't know how to explain it, but it's, like if you're pleasing any friend or someone you have who you deeply care about, you know when they're pleased. So I'm not sure how to explain it better. Prabhu, yes?
The simple indication is material desires decrease, spiritual desires increase.
Yeah, that's the...
If we're practicing properly, it's automatic proof.
Yeah, so exactly. The material desires decrease and we're able to focus more on Krishna and serving Krishna and be satisfied with that. We're not looking for other things. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, okay. Thanks everyone for coming. Hare Krishna.